This meeting is being recorded.
Hello and welcome to this first look exploring session. It's not a standard exploring session because we're looking at some source material. This isn't dramatic. This is a source for something that we've already recorded. And Larum for London, or the Siege of Antwerp, one of the sources for which was The Spoil of Antwerp by George Gascoigne, a playwright who we have encountered many a time. I say many a time, 3 times on these sessions, and we thought we'd actually go back and read the source material for the play, Larum for London. Larum for London was not written by George Gascoigne. George Gascoigne read what we're about to read, and see what we get out of it, and as general. Grist to the mill for when we come round to thinking about what to do with Larum for London. We should be doing this with more plays as well, where there are specific sources that we might be able to dip into. So hopefully this will become a semi-regular thing. So, to read through the Spoil of Antwerp, faithfully reported by a true Englishman who was present at the same, Liza we have reading. Liza, introduce yourself.
Hello, I am Liza. I am a singer, actor, early modern text coach, 2 actors, and general nerd in London.
And Tom is also reading. Tom, introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Tom. Hello, Tom.
And Angela, introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Angela. I'm a ballad history nerd, also. Nerd, also, not ballad. And yes, from living in London.
And Eric, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Eric. I have a ring of power, but I'm not telling you where it is.
And I'm your host, Robert Crighton.
Not even if we answer your riddles correctly?
Yeah, I don't delve too deeply into that one, I think, Liza. Yes, I generally try to keep things moving along. We shall see how well that goes. So we're going to start reading through this text, finding out how it goes. A text tidied up by Eric for us, very kindly. In very short notice, in fact. Days passed and it came winging back into the emails. So this is The Spoil of Antwerp. Faithfully, we can discuss maybe at a future date how faithfully. This is reported by a true Englishman who was present at the same, November 1576. Printed at London by Richard Jones. And there's an introduction to the reader, which I'll ask Liza to read.
I shall earnestly require the gentle reader to correct the errors past and escaping in printing of this pamphlet, according to this table. And furthermore, to understand that this victory was obtained with loss but of 500 Spaniards, or 6 at the most, of whom I heard no man of name recounted, save only Don Emmanuel. Thus much for haste I had forgotten in the treaty, and therefore thought meet to place it here in the beginning, and therewithal to advise thee that these outrages and disordered cruelties done to our nations proceeded but from the common soldiers. Neither was there any of the 12 which entered the English house a man of any charge or reputation. So that I hope these extremities notwithstanding, the king their master will take such good order for redress thereof, as our countrymen in the end shall rest satisfied with reason. And the amity between our most gracious sovereign and him shall remain also firm and unviolate. The which I pray God speedily to grant for the benefit of this realm. Amen.
And then there's a note about a model which is presumably a map of Antwerp, which is sadly missing from the text, which is quite annoying. So the troops of Almains by the riverside should be footmen, and the troop next to the windmill should be horsemen. So there was obviously some issues there that we can't look into. So it's interesting. It's having done the play that's based on this. There's elements that I'm remembering that the cruelty's done. It's done by the common soldiers. Any of the 12 which entered the English house, I remember the English house being an element, but not so much. And it's just mentioning this introduction is sort of talking about things that we haven't really read yet. So it's like Gascoigne's just gone, oh, I forgot to mention this.
Well, presumably, I don't know. Were there negotiations going on between the English and Spanish crowns at that time? Was that why he was at such pains to emphasize that it was not nobles, it was not Spanish nobles who did the bad stuff, it was common soldiers?
That I don't know. I wouldn't have thought so around that.
And that he appealed to the Spanish king to redress. I don't know. Were
it might just be a
that's
class
very
thing.
No, the English were just bystanders, basically. I think they were in Antwerp for trade.
Yeah,
But they
definitely. I mean, it was the
they weren't
Spanish wanting to
enjoined.
retake that bit of the Netherlands that had rebelled against their rule.
I mean, the foreign policy situation in 1576 should be that Elizabeth is doing her hardest to not get into a big spat with anybody because they've got too much going on, and so she's continually negotiating with people. She doesn't finally fall out with Spain until 1580, sort of 788.
I'm just wondering whether it's more personal. It's just that George Gascoigne has met some of these people, and he's just at pains to say, "Look, no, it's not any of those. You guys, you're fine. It was the common soldiers who won't get a mention, or something closer to that."
Perhaps the English delegation, maybe they had an ongoing petition to the Spanish royal court for redress when this was published.
These are all good questions of which we do not have the answers. Let's read on and gather some more data. We've got a chunky little paragraph coming up now, which we'll dance around. When you hear the bell, I'll move you on. So Tom, start us off with the main body of the text of the Spoil of Antwerp. Let's find out what was spoiled.
Since my hap was to be present at so piteous a spectacle as the sacking and spoil of Antwerp, a lamentable example which hath already filled all Europe with dreadful news of great calamity, I have thought good for the benefit of my country to publish a true report thereof, the which may as well serve for profitable example unto all estates of such condition as suffered in the same, as also answer all honest expectations with a mean truth set down between the extreme surmises of sundry doubtful minds, and increased by the manifold light tales which have been engendered by fearful or affectionate rehearsal. And therewithal, if the wickedness used in the said town do seem unto the well-disposed reader a sufficient cause of God's so just a scourge and plague, and yet the fury of the vanquishers do also seem more barbarous and cruel than may become a good Christian conqueror. Let these my few words become for warning on both hands, and let them stand as a lantern of light between two perilous rocks, the both amending the one and desting the other, we may gather fire out of the flint and honey out of the thistle.
And
that end-
Angela, if you could take up the cudgels.
To that end, all stories and chronicles are written, and to that end I presume to publish this pamphlet, protesting that neither malice to the one side nor partial affection to the other shall make my pen to swerve any jot from truth of that which I will set down and saw executed. For if I were disposed to write maliciously against the vanquishers, their former barbarous cruelty, insolences, rapes, spoils, incests, and sacrileges committed in sundry other places might yield me sufficient matter without the lawful remembrance of this their late stratagem. Or if I would undertake to move a general compassion by blazing abroad the miseries and calamities of the vanquished, their long-sustained injuries and yokes of intolerable bondage, their continual broils in war, their doubtful dreads in peace, their accusations without cause and condemnations without proof, might enable a domed stone to talk of their troubles and fetch brinish tears out of the most craggy rock, to lament and bewail the burning houses of so near neighbours. But, as I said before, mine only intent is to set down a plain truth, for the satisfying of such as have hitherto been carried about with doubtful reports, and for a profitable example unto all such as being subject to like imperfections might fall thereby into the like calamities.
And to make the matter more perspicuous, I must derive the beginning of this discourse a little beyond the beginning of the massacre, that the cause being partly opened, the effect may be the more plainly seen. There we'll pause briefly. Some throat clearing there. It's true. He's saying is definitely true. It's not partial at all. He's absolutely not partial at all. And if he writes anything about the malicious, evil, horrible, nasty, horrible people did horrible things, that's absolutely not partial at all. Thoughts in the room about this initial throat clearing. Profitable for all estates too. So this is useful information for everyone of any status. Allegedly. Thoughts, Angela?
I'm kind of fascinated by the way that he introduces some doubt about whether this was a real punishment from God or not. So, because he's sort of like, he's obviously weighing the blame towards the Spanish, but on the other hand trying to claim he's not doing that. But it's quite interesting, that moment of doubt is was it right for God to visit this kind of judgment on these people? And actually we saw a bit of that in the play, didn't we, where this sense that they were so careless, just so busy with their own finances and everything.
Which may be picked up from this. Any other thoughts? Eric?
Well, having read this twice, it kind of reminded me of I think it was Tragedy of Alphonsus, where you've got something that is not happening in Britain, but in the UK, and it kind of, but it affects obviously the English sort of affairs in some way, even if it's not directly. Because obviously in the Tragedy of Alphonsus, it was quite sort of, more directly in terms of, it's called, they participated in the battle, whereas here they're kind of bystanders. But yeah, this is just kind of an interesting intro.
Yes, what's happening to people, Englishmen abroad, when in the middle of a conflict of some description. Any other thoughts before we move on? Because I say he's about to give us some backstory and more details. We just know he's going to tell the truth. A statement that is always a dangerous one to make. Eric, take up the cudgels. So next paragraphs, Eric, then Liza, then Tom, then Angela.
It is then to be understood that the sacking and spoil of Antwerp hath been, by all likelihood, long pretended by the Spaniards, and that they have done nothing else but lying in wait continually to find any least quarrel to put ye same in execution. For proof whereof, their notable rebellion and mutiny begun in the same, when their watchword was fora vilaco, might sufficiently bewray their malicious and cruel intent. And though it were then smoothly colored over and subtly appeased by ye crafty devices of the same, yet the coals of their choler being but raked up in the embers of false semblance, have now found out the wicked winds of wiliness and wrath, which meeting together have kindled such a flame as gave open way to their detestable devices. For the estates of all the Low Countries being overwearied with the intolerable burden of their tyrannies, and having taken arms to withstand their malice and rebellious mutinies, the town of Antwerp, being left open and subject unto the citadel, did yet remain quiet, and entered not into any martial action.
Whereat the Spaniards, being much moved and having not yet opportunity to work their will so colorably as they wished, bestowed certain cannon shot out of the said castle, and slew certain innocent souls, with some other small harm and damage done to the edifices, thinking thereby to harden the hearts of the poor Flemings, and to make them take arms for their just defense, whiles they thereby might take occasion to execute their unjust pretense. This was done on the 19th or 20th of October last.
Now, to answer all objections, I doubt not, but it will be alleged that the castle bestowed the said cannon shot at ye town, because they of the town did shoot at the Prince of Orange's ships, which lay within sight thereof. But alas, it was easy to find a staff when a man would beat a dog.
For the truth is that those ships did no greater hurt either to the town or castle than friendly to waft up all manner of grain and victuals for the sustenance of the said town, which even then began to want such provision, by reason that the said Spaniards had built a fort on Flanders side upon the same river, and thereby stopped all such as brought victual to the said town, burning and destroying the country near adjoining, and using all terror to the poor people, to the intent yet Antwerp might lack provision.
So it's starting to kick off. Wicked winds of wiliness and wrath. So he's not above a bit of alliteration, Yeah, moving in all that stuff. We're getting some dates, the 19th or 20th of October last. Cannon shot out of the castle. We definitely had that in the play. That was very much a feature. Slew certain innocent souls with some other small harm and damage done to the edifices. And there's the cover story, which is, there's some it's provocation because of the ships. That's the reason given. Any additional thoughts at this stage to that? No sustenance, no grain or victuals coming in.
So it's interesting that in the play, this was kept to very strongly, wasn't it? That the Spaniards told them, "You've not stopped the Prince of Orange's ships coming, therefore you're in trouble." But I don't remember there being any reference in the play to actual hunger in the town. That the town were having difficulty getting food. You got this sense that actually they were very well off in the town.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that bit was dropped in the play.
I think it's because they wanted to highlight in the play the whole issue about the owning of things, and did they have it coming because of their great wealth, kind of.
Absolutely, this is this judgment of God thing, isn't it? So in a play you've got to be careful because you might get censored if you're not giving the right story. So it's kind of interesting that.
Okay, we now have a chunky paragraph. We'll dance around a bit. Stay in the same order, Eric, Liza, Tom, etc. But I'll ring the bell every so often to ring the changes. Eric, take us away on the next bit. So, burning and destroying the country near adjoining, terror to the poor people, to the intent that Antwerp might lack provision. What happens next?
And about the same time, also, the Spaniards cut off a bridge, which was the open passage between Antwerp and Machelen, at a village called Larum, a manifest proof of their plain intent to distress the said town, and to shut up the same from all the rest of Brabant. Since they were walled in with the river on the one side, and on the other, the Spanish horsemen occupied all the country, and so terrified the poor people as they durst not bring their commodities to the same. All this notwithstanding, the chief rulers of the said town of Antwerp appeased the people and put up these injuries until they might be better able to redress them. Soon after, the Spaniards, assisted by the treason of certain high dukes, I'm not sure how to pronounce this, entered the town of Maastricht upon a sudden and put the same to sack, killing and destroying great numbers of innocent people therein, a thing to be noted. For that Maastricht had never revolted, but stood quiet under their garrisons as faithful subjects to the king, and the one half thereof pertained also unto the Bishop of Liège, who had yet meddled nothing at all in these actions. The chief rulers and people of Antwerp, perceiving thereby the cruel intent of the Spaniards, and doubting their Dutch garrison, which was of the Count Eberstein's regiment, as they were also which betrayed Maastricht, began to abandon the town, leaving their houses and goods behind them. And they sought to withdraw themselves into some place of safer abode.
And Liza, take up the cudgels.
Whereas the estates, being moved with compassion and doubting that the town would shortly be left desolate, levied a power of 3,000 footmen and 800 or 1,000 horsemen, and sent the same under the conduct of the Marquise d'Avray, the young Count d'Egmont, Monsieur de Capre, and Monsieur de Bercel, Monsieur de Gourney, and other nobles and gentlemen to secure and defend the town of Antwerp against the cruel pretense of the said Spaniards. And they came before the gates thereof on Friday the 2nd of this instant, at a port in the east or southeast side, thereof called Kibdor Porte, whereat the Spaniards, being enraged, discharged sundry shot of great artillery from the castle, but to small purpose. At last, Monsieur de Champagne, who was governor of the town, and the Count d'Everstein, who was colonel of the garrison, demanded of the estates wherefore they approached the town in such order, who answered that they came to enter the same as friends and to entrench and defend it from the Spaniards, protesting further that they would offer no manner of violent damage or injury to the persons or goods of any such as inhabited the same.
Tom, take up.
Hereupon you said Monsieur Champagne and the Count of Everstein went out unto them and conferred more privately together by the space of 1 hour, and returned into the town, leaving estates and power at a village called Bergerhout.
And Angela.
On the morrow, being the 3rd of this instant, they were permitted to enter and came into the town, 21 ensigns of footmen and 6 cornets of horsemen. Immediately after their enter, the inhabitants brought them sacks of wool and other such provision, wherewith they approached the yard or plain ground which lieth before the castle, and placing the same at the ends of 5 streets which lie ope unto the said castle yard, entrenched under them with such expedition that in less than 5 hours those street ends were all reasonably well fortified from the castle for any sudden... Oh, I've got a break.
Yes, an unexpected end to the sentence.
Yes, for any sudden something. At this time, and 12 days before I was in the said town of Antwerp upon certain private affairs of mine own, so that I was enforced to become an eyed witness of their entry and all that they did. As also afterwards, for all the gates were kept fast shut and I could not depart, to behold the pitiful stratagem which followed. The castle thundered with shot at the town, but it was a very misty day, so that they could neither find their marks very well, nor yet see how the street ends were entrenched. It was a strange thing to see the willingness of the inhabitants, and how soon many hands had dispatched a very great piece of work, for before midnight they had made the trenches as high as the length of a pike, and had begun one trench for a counterscarf between all those streets and the castle yard, the which they perfected unto the halfway from St. George's churchyard unto the waterside by St. Michael's, and there left from work, meaning to have perfected it the next day. That counterscarf had been to much purpose if it had been finished, as shall appear by a model of the whole place, which I have annexed to the end of this treaty, by view whereof his skilful reader may plainly perceive the execution of every particularity. These things thus begun and set in forwardness, it is to be noted that the Spaniards, having intelligence of the state's power when it set forwards from Brussels, and perceiving that it bent towards Antwerp, had sent to Maastricht, Lyra, and Aalst to draw all the power yet could be made unto the castle of Antwerp.
And there we'll pause, because we're now in real time. He's now in the room. Almost everything before that was, from other accounts. But then he does actually state, and now I'm here. This is the stuff I saw. So now we're here. It is unfortunate at this point. It says, well, if you look at the map at the back of the book, you'll be able to follow all of this perfectly. Unfortunately, we do not have this map. And the only maps I could find were not very helpful in deciphering what's going on. Beyond that, there's a sort of place called Antwerp with a castle on it in a corner. So that was sort of about it. So yeah, we're getting lots and lots of sense of all this. The people of the appeasing the people to put up with these injuries until they might be able better to redress them. So again, that felt like that was action that felt that was connected to the play again. All this stuff about people fleeing and throughout here. And then the defences that are coming up, that people are actually doing things, that they're building these trenches as high as the length of a pike before midnight. They did it incredibly quickly. So details of defences that we only sort of get hinted at in the action of the play. We do get the impression that people are defending, and I don't think we ever get any particular sense of how the defence actually functions. Thoughts on the room? Are we following? There's an awful lot of names being thrown at us. I'm assuming nobody really knows who any of them are, which is fine. We're not obliged to. We're following what George gives us. Eric,
I think some of them actually do appear in the play. You get like the what's his name, the Marquis de Davray or something. Like you get them by name, and like I think later on you've got Count de Egmont, but I can't find that right now. Anyway, yeah, sort of maybe not Monsieur de Gournay or whatever. You get the young Count Egmont who appears in the play later on as well, sort of as a basically a brave young sort of count.
So we'd get the word that's been mentioned in the chat. We're talking about the counter scarf, which is someone has glossed in the thing. Liza, do you want to talk about a counter scarf?
Yeah, I mean, these guys are basically preparing for a siege. The Spaniards are in the castle. Now a bunch of people from the estates, from the surrounding little countries, city-states, have come to reinforce the town, and they get allowed into town. I assume they brought their own provisions with them. Otherwise, everyone's going to be very hungry very soon. They get into town and they immediately start fortifying the place. And he says in less than 5 hours, the streets ends which lie open to the castle, that is, the ends of streets down which it would be really easy for the Spanish to lead a charge from the castle, then get fortified. Presumably little walls get built across the streets ends. They would probably just pry up paving stones, put them up, maybe fill them in with barrels of rubble. To do that, dig ditches in front of them. And they says, how soon many hands had dispatched a very great piece of work, for before midnight, they had made the trenches as high as the length of a pike. Now, a pike is taller than a person. It's one of those big ass pole arms that an army has to wield in blocks. They're taller than your average poleaxe. So these are large trenches, and presumably that's counting the height of the wall. So the wall is called a scarp. It's a little battlement that you can that not only blocks the enemy, but you can also fire from it. And the counter scarp is the trench in front of a wall. So before midnight, they had made the trenches as high as the length of a pike, and had begun one trench for a counterscarp between all those streets and the castle yard. So they're digging a massive great trench across all the streets they've just fortified.
What's nice is that George is pointing out that it's a strange thing to see how quickly and how willingly the people have all done this. You know, that this is a marvel that it happened so quickly, because he was there, he saw it happen.
But they don't finish the counterscarp. No. It says the counterscarp had been to much purpose if it had been finished. So presumably that's going to become relevant later. Sorry, Tom.
Just to carry on, I mean, it's well known that the battles were won by the trenches dug by the sappers, and building defenses. Trenches and scarps was paramount from Caesar right the way through, because they're just fabulous fortifications and well known and well executed by the people who have martial sensibility. So that was the first and foremost. And sappers have always, as I say, from the time of Caesar to the First World War, sappers were very important to the outcome of any engagement.
So it's when these reinforcements arrive from out of town, the inhabitants brought them sacks of wool and other such provision. So it's an interesting question, you know, are they effectively being paid in provisions by the town? And wool, of course. It is November, remember. It's the 3rd of November. That's the day we're on at the moment. We're about to go on to the 4th.
It's possible that the wool might have been intended for use as wadding in projectile weapons.
So, all sorts of questions we don't necessarily know the answers to. But options. Eric.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about the timeline, because obviously it starts off in October, and then you've got 12 days before, or is that before before October then, like sort of before the narrative begins?
Yeah, so it's 12 days before he actually arrived at the beginning of November. So he was basically doing the backstory. The last 2 weeks have been sort of this happening. So I think that's how the timeline works.
Okay.
But
so when he goes the 4th of this instant and all that stuff, it's actually like the 4th of this month, basically.
Yes, of November, yeah. Of now, because he's now there. So we should follow chronologically forward. Angela.
I was intrigued by a little bit of extra that he's given us here about the way that the Spanish had, meanwhile, so they hadn't been doing nothing while they were waiting in the castle. They'd actually sacked Maastricht, and they did it with a treason, assisted by the treason of certain high dukes, because that treason by key people is brought into the play, but in relation to Antwerp. But it's interesting here that he actually says that this happened in Maastricht while they were all waiting.
Yeah, so there's a sort of enveloping of things in different contexts to make the play more exciting, because the play wants to be very focused on one thing and one place. Okay, let's find out what happened on the 4th and see how the narrative goes forward. And Eric, read the next few shortish paragraphs, I think, and then we'll carry it back on around the room.
So that on Sunday, the 4th of this instant in the morning, they all met at the said castle, and their powers, as far as I could gather, were these. They came from Maastricht, very near to 1,000 horsemen, led by Dom Alonso de Vergas, who is the general of the horsemen, and 500 horsemen or more, governed by the campmaster Francesco de Valdez. There came from Lier 500 footmen or more, governed by the campmaster Julien de Romero. Shall I keep going? Okay.
Yeah, crack on.
Okay. There came from Aalst 2,000 footmen, which were the same that rebelled for their pay and other unreasonable demands immediately after the winning of Zierixi. Sorry for the pronunciation on these names.
They are spelt in interesting ways, and I don't know some of them what their modernizations is.
These had none other conductor than their elector, after the manner of such as mutiny and rebel, but were of sundry companies, as Don Emanuel's and others. Nevertheless, I've been so bold in the model as to set down the said Don Emanuel for their leader, both because I think that their mutiny notwithstanding, he led them at the exploit, and also because he was slain amongst them at their entry. Thus the number of Spaniards was 4,000 or thereabouts, besides some help that they had of the garrison within the castle, and besides 1,000 high Almains or more, which came from Maastricht, Lier, and those parts, and were of these three sundry regiments, led by Charles Fockers, Pueldervils, and Fremsbergs, but they were all led by Charles Focker. Sorry.
I'm going to say Fokker. I'm just going to for the moment. I'm sure I don't know.
Sense.
I don't know. We've got to remember that these are the spellings we're given. They may or may not relate precisely correctly to the actual names of the people involved.
So
it could be some other Fokker. Anyway.
Yes, so that the whole force of the Spaniards and their accomplices was 5,000 and upwards. The which assembled and met at the castle on the said fourth day of about 10 of the clock before dinner.
Fourth day, 10 o'clock before dinner. Always useful detail I like. Liza, carry on, please.
And as I have heard credibly reported, would neither stay to refresh themselves, having marched all night and the day before, nor yet to confer of anything, but only of the order how they should issue and assail, protesting and vowing neither to eat nor drink until they might eat and drink at liberty and pleasure in Antwerp, the which vow they performed, contrary to all men's reason and expectation. Their order of entry into the castle yard and of their approach to the trenches I did not see, for I could not get out of the town. Neither did I think it reasonable to be hospes in aliena republica curiosus. Yet, as I heard it rehearsed by sundry of themselves, I will also here rehearse it for a truth. The horsemen and footmen, which came from Maastricht and Lier, came through a village on the east side of the town called Burgerhut, about 10 of the clock before noon, as before said. The governor and estates being thereof advertised, sent out presently part of their horsemen and footmen to discover and take knowledge of them. But before they could issue out of the gates, the Spaniards were passed on the southwest side of the town ditch, and entered at a gate which standeth on the counterscarf of the castle yard, called the Windmill Port. There entered the horsemen and all the footmen, saving the high Almains, who marched round about the castle by a village called Kiel, and trailing their pikes on the ground after them, came in at a small postern on the braes by the river on the east side of the castle.
And we'll just pause there. So it's after listing an awful lot of soldiers, there's these people and there's these people, there's thousands of them, Spaniards and their accomplices, and now we get some actual action, which George does at least admit he didn't see, but he heard reported, therefore he will say it's true. So he didn't see what this stuff was, but it was told him by reliable sources, or it was just generally known that this is what happened. And yeah, so it's got a bit of excitement going on here. 10 o'clock before noon. We've got a lot of people entering gates and marching round and things, where having a map would be quite helpful.
Yeah, it's dramatic, isn't it? They've marched all night and all the day before, but they don't stay to eat and reorder themselves. They just march straight in, and that's what gives them the advantage over the guys in the town who just built all the fortifications. They're giving orders to go out and assess the strength of the Spanish forces, and meanwhile the Spanish forces have totally circumvented the unfinished counterscarp and entered the town. The squadron of German pikemen, the high, or possibly Swiss, the high Almains. They trailing their pikes behind them. Like I said, a pike is taller than a person, so if you're carrying it, the only way to do it is to drag one end on the ground behind you. So that squadron has gone round to the riverside of the town, and before our Dutchmen could do anything about it, they've bypassed all the fortifications and entered the town anyway.
Yeah, they basically just walked round. They've just walked around the defences. Didn't think that one through, did they? Angela?
I think, I don't know how many people have seen The Lord of the Rings, but as a historian, the thing I really love about it is that you actually see this, in that you see all these different troops coming in and entering at different points, and it's fantastic to see it really, kind of like, how might that look? And what's fantastic here is that they're actually surrounding the town. So the reason they're coming in at all these different points is so that then they've actually got troops positioned at all these different points. And the mercenaries, which is the Almains, who are the pikemen pikes, as you say, they're 10 foot tall. They're absolutely huge. And you have to be a real specialist to be able to use it. The reason they come in through a postern gate, which is not really the way your pikemen should be coming, is because it positions them in such a perfect place, and make sure they've got a clear run as they go through. So it's really quite spectacular. Like I say, that would just be so dramatic. And I just think, oh, Lord of the Rings when I think about this, because you just see all these different kinds of troops appearing. Obviously, they are orcs and other sorts of weird stuff, but I try not to think about that.
Are the Spanish orcs in this analysis?
From George Gascoigne's point of view, I suspect yes.
Maybe they're ring wraiths.
Yeah, I don't think they're only the leaders are ring wraiths, because respect. Anyway, Eric.
But also, we've been told that before this, like, the Spanish had basically literally scorched earth, like, so they can't actually do anything. Like, they can't, like, people around them can't cultivate or literally scorched earth policy. So they can't, like, they've locked them in town essentially, and now they're going to kill them.
And that's the thing, is when they're talking about vowing neither to eat nor drink, the sinister part of that is, until they can sack the town. It's not just let's get on with the job. It's actually, no, let's get on and do the pillaging. The sooner we're in the town, the sooner we can rip it to shreds. Fun times. Okay, we got a long paragraph. We'll dance around this one. We'll spread it out as we go. Tom's up next, I think. So let's see. They've penetrated the town in various different places. Let's see where this goes.
Those which came from Alst came through the said village Kiel, and so through the castle, issued out of the same at the foregate, which standeth towards the town. Being thus passed and entered into the castle yard about 11 of the clock, they of Alst and of the castle cast themselves into 4 squadrons, they of Maastricht and Lyre into 2 squadrons, and their horsemen into a troop behind them, and the high Almains in 1 squadron, or battalion by the riverside. Being thus ordered, an appointment given where every squadron should charge and endure, they cast off certain loose shot from every squadron and attacked the scaramouche, which continued not 1 hour before they drew their squadrons so near unto the court's counterscarf and trenches that they break and charge pell-mell. The castle had all this while played at the town and trenches with thundering shot, but now, upon a signal given, ceased to shoot any more for fear to hurt their own men, wherein I noted their good order, which wanted no direction in their greatest fury. The Walloons, the Almains, which served in the trenches, defended all this while very stoutly, and the Spaniards, with their Almains, continued the charge with such valour that in fine they won the counterscarp and presently scaled the trenches with great fury.
I'll just pause there. Wow, there's a lot of stuff in there. It took them an hour to break through. The castle's been doing artillery fire, but stopping to avoid friendly fire incidents once the battle is engaged. They're very well ordered, and the fighting. This is all feeling very, very plausible. It has to be said. On that sense. Angela, take up from there, please.
The Walloons and Almains, having long resisted without any fresh relief or supply, many of them in this meanwhile being slain and hurt, were not able any longer to repulse the Spaniards, so that they entered the trenches about 12 of the clock, and presently pursued their victory down every street. In their chase, as fast as they gained any cross street, they flanked the same with their muskets, until they saw no longer resistance of any power, and then proceeded in chase, executing all such as they overtook. In this good order they charged and entered. In this good order they proceeded, and in as good order their lackeys and pages followed with firebrands and wildfire, setting the houses on fire in every place where their masters had entered. The Walloons and Almains, which were to defend the town, being grown into some security by reason that their trenches were so high as seemed invincible, and lacking sufficient generals and directors, were found as far out of order as the Spaniards were to be honoured for the good order and direction which they kept. For those which came to supply and relieve the trenches came straggling and loose. Some came from the furthest side of the town, some that were nearer came very fearfully, and many out of their lodgings from drinking and carousing, who would scarcely believe that any conflict was begun, when the Spaniards now met them in the streets to put them out of doubt that they dallied not. To conclude, their carelessness and lack of foresight was such that they had never a corps du guard to supply and relieve their trenches, but only one in the marketplace of the town, which was a good quarter of a mile from their fortifications, and that also was of Almains, who, when they spied the Spaniards, did gently kneel down, letting their pikes fall, and crying, "Oh, leave a Spaniardin, leave a Spaniardin." Now
I'll pass over to Eric.
Sorry.
Now I have set down the order of their entry, approach, charge, and assault, together with their proceeding in victory, and that by credible report, both of the Spaniards themselves and of others who served in their company. Let me also say a little of that which I saw executed. I was lodged in the English house, ut supra, and had not gone abroad that morning by reason of weighty business which I had in hand at the same day. At dinner time, the merchantmen of my country, which came out of the town and dined in my chamber, told me that a hot skirmish was begun in the castle yard, and that the fury thereof still increased. About the midst of dinner, news came that the shot was so thick as neither ground, houses, nor people could be discerned for the smoke thereof. And before dinner were fully ended, that the Spaniards were like to win the trenches. Whereat I stepped from the table and went hastily to a high tower of the said English house, from whence I might discover far in 4 or 5 places of the town towards the castle yard. And thereby I was well assured that the Spaniards indeed were entered within the trenches. So that I came down and took my cloak and sword to see the certainty thereof. And as I passed towards the bourse, I met many, but overtook none. And those which I met were no townsmen, but soldiers. Neither walked they as men which use traffic, but ran as men which are in fear. Whereat, being somewhat grieved, and seeing the townsmen stand every man before his door with such weapons as they had, I demanded one of them what it meant, who answered me in these words: "Hélas, monsieur, il n'y a point d'ordre, et voilà la ruine de cette ville." "Ayez courage, mon ami," quoth I, and so went onwards yet towards the bourse, meeting all the way more and more which mended their pace.
And we'll pass over to Liza.
The last, a Walloon trumpeter on horseback, who seemed to be but a boy of years, drew his sword and laid about him, crying, "Où est-ce que vous enfuyez, canaille, faisant test pour l'honneur de la patrie?" Wherewith 50 or 60 of them turned head and went backwards towards the bourse, the which encouraged me, per compagnie, to proceed. But, alas, this comfort endured but a while, for by that time I came on the farther side of the bourse, I might see a great troop coming in greater haste, with their heads as close together as a school of young fry or a flock of sheep, who met me on the farther side of the bourse towards the marketplace, and having their leaders foremost, for I knew them by their javelins, boar spears, and staves, bare me over backwards and ran over my belly and my face, long time before I could recover on foot. At last, when I was up, I looked on every side, and seeing them run so fast, began thus to bethink me: what in God's name do I hear, which have no interest in this action, since they who came to defend this town are content to leave it at large and shift for themselves? And whilst I stood thus musing, another flock of flyers came so fast that they bare me on my nose, and ran as many over my back as erst had marched over my guts. In fine, I got up like a tall fellow, and went with them for company. But their haste was such as I could never overtake them, until I came at a broad cross street which lieth between the English house and the said bourse. There I overtook some of them, grovelling on the ground and groaning for the last gasp, and some other which had turned backwards to avoid the tickling of the Spanish muskets, who had gotten the ends of the said broad cross street and flanked it both ways. There I stayed a while, till, hearing the shot increase, and fearing to be surprised with such as might follow in tail of us, I gave adventure to pass through the said cross street, and without vaunt be it spoken, passed through 500 shot before I could recover the English house.
And there, I think, is a good point to pause. There's a lot to take in there. Yeah, so when they're talking about dinner, they're sort of talking about lunch, really, because, of course, this is coincident. His account of his experiences is coincident with what he's heard other people telling him earlier about the way the action went down. I mean, it's interesting. It's the way that people in the town are thinking, our defences that we threw up the other night are so good they'll never get. And it's the Maginot line, isn't it? It's, the enemy have bypassed it entirely, and just run rampant. And there's flanking manoeuvres, coming around with muskets, and then the fact they've got lackeys and pages following after the main forces, setting fire to things. As well, and then we have his account of his involvement, and of which is, at the beginning they're all sitting having lunch, going, "Oh, it's all going to be fine," and then by the time they finished, dessert or whatever, it's all going, and he just decides to go out and have a look, and he gets run over and falls on his back, and then he gets run over again and falls down on his front, and it's all sort of a bit funny, and he's asking himself, why the hell am I here? It's got nothing to do with me. I should go home. It's fascinating. I mean, it's Pierre Bezukhov wandering into a battlefield, isn't it? And just going, what the hell am I doing? Thoughts on the room? Sorry, I'm just wittering on. Angela, then Eric.
I'm just remembering the bit in the alarm, which was of the soldier the mercenary soldier who said, well, you never cared about me before, why should I care about you now? And here we got the mercenaries who just think, this is a bit too much for us, so they just say, they just give up to the Spaniards, in German of course, and either join them or wander off. So it's pretty brutal, that when the town is just dependent on people that it pays for its security.
Yes, this is a problem with mercenaries. You never really get proper satisfaction from service. I
mean, they're doing really well. I mean, he points out, that they really stoutly defended, for a while, but then that's it. Once it was given up, then what's the point?
Yeah. Why should we be here, Eric?
I was just this I guess is more a history question than a text question. But when he says like merchantmen of my country, does he literally mean like people whose job is trade, or is it like sort of people of the merchant class?
Well, both of those could be either of those.
But like it doesn't mean necessarily the same. It's not the same thing necessarily. Like you can be a merchant without being a trader as such, or
well, all merchants trade.
Okay.
I mean, so it's people who trade in goods, I would think.
And it's, the high tower of the said English house. They've got a high tower, so we'll go up there and have a little look at that. And you've got all these people running. It's this description of mostly people running. That's what he mostly sees. He sees the chaos, and he sees people calling out, it's all going to pot, guys. Have courage. Sod that for a game of soldiers. Where are you running to? All these people in different languages throwing out these things. Eric again.
Also, there was that line, I gave adventure to pass through the said cross street, and without vaunt be it spoken, passed through 500 shot. Does that then mean like 500 people who were shot, or like 500 soldiers who were shooting at him?
Yeah, 500 bullets being shot down the street.
It's one of those things of just walking down the street. That may be exaggeration.
Stormtroopers from Star Wars. They never hit anything. Well,
to be fair, the accuracy of musketry at this time is not high.
You have to if you were within about 50 yards, it was an accurate shot. But it's also
moving target.
Did they say earlier that it was a misty day, or was that another day?
Don't recall. I may have missed it.
No, it was the gunpowder and smoke and shot.
Yeah, it was misty. Yeah, it was misty, so that they were missing things.
Yes.
Yeah, and then there was masses of smoke, wasn't there? After that.
Well, that's yes. I mean, once you start firing in street situations, the smoke is going to be that's going to be difficult to clear. Actually, it's going to be difficult to see anything.
But it's amazing how professional the Spaniards are. I mean, creating crossfires in streets and just they're up for it. They have a plan. They're working the plan, and the rest, like everything else. Again, as soon as the commanders go down, who are the only ones who have the plan, if you will, the rest of the troops are just like sheep. They don't know what to do, and they think, well, there's no backup. There's no situation is very dire. Let's get out of here, lads. And the Spaniards are doing very well.
I mean, they are the best. They are the crack troops of the world at this time. We used to have a debate when I used to teach European history at Warwick. We used to have a debate: whose were the best forces, the French or the Spanish, in 1600? Because it was just tipping then, but they were, red hot.
Yeah, and this is an experienced force that's turned up here, and they are motivated because, of course, they want to sack the places in, and they by golly they're doing it. And I'm sure it's going to get worse. Right, where were we? Who had we got to? Liza was last time. So, yes, Tom, take it away.
At my coming thither, I found many of the merchants standing before the gate, whom I would not discomfort nor dismay, but said that the Spaniards had once entered the town, and that I hoped that they were gone back again. Nevertheless, I went to the governor, and privily persuaded him to draw in the company and to shut up the gates, the which he consented unto, and desired me, because I was somewhat better acquainted with such matters than the merchants, to take charge of the key. I took it willingly, but before I could well shut the bar of the gates, the Spaniards were now come forward into the same street, and passing by ye door, called come in, bestowing 5 or 6 musket shots at the gate where I answered them, whereof one came very near my nose, and piercing through the gate, strake one of the merchants on the head, without any great or dangerous hurt, but the heat of the pursuit was yet much such that they could not attend the spoil, but passed on it and chased to the new town, where they slew infinite numbers of people, and by 3 of the clock or before returned victors, having slain or put to flight all their enemies. And now, to keep promise and to speak without partiality, I must needs confess that it was a greatest victory, and the roundliest executed, that hath been seen, read, or heard of in our age. And that it was a thing miraculous to consider how trenches of such a height should be entered, passed over, and won both by footmen and horsemen. For immediately after the footmen were gotten in, the horsemen found means to follow, and being many of them hackwood berserkers on horseback, did pass by their own footmen and the streets, and such hastened both the flight of the Walloons, and made the way opener unto speedy execution.
Angela.
But whosoever will therein must extol the Spaniards for their valour and order, must therewithal confess that it was the very ordinance of God for a just plague and scourge unto the town. For otherwise it passeth all man's capacity to conceive how it should be possible. And yet the disorder and lack of foresight in the Walloons did great help to augment the Spanish glory and boast. To conclude, the Count d'Avestein was drowned in the new town. The Marquis de Havre and Champagne escaped out of the said new town and recovered the Prince of Orange's ships. Only the young Count d'Egmont was taken fighting by St. Miguel's. Monsieur de Capre and Monsieur de Gouny were also taken, but I heard of none that fought stoutly, save only the said Count of Egmont, whom the Colonel Verdugo, a Spaniard of an honourable compassion and good mind, did save with great danger to himself in defending the Count. In this conflict there were slain 600 Spaniards or thereabouts, and on the Thursday next following, a view of the dead bodies in the town being taken, it was esteemed at 17,000 men, women, and children. A pitiful massacre, though God gave victory to the Spaniards. And surely as their valiance was to be much commended, so yet I can much discommend their barbarous cruelty in many respects. For methinks that as when God giveth abundance of wealth, the owner ought yet to have regard on whom he bestow it, even so, when God giveth a great and miraculous victory, the conquerors ought to have great regard unto their execution. And though some which favour the Spanish faction will allege sundry reasons to the contrary, yet when the blood is cold and the fury over, methinks that a true Christian heart should stand content with victory and refrain to provoke God's wrath by shedding of innocent blood. These things I rehearse the rather, because they neither spared age, nor sex, time, nor place, person, nor country, profession, nor religion, young nor old, rich nor poor, strong nor feeble, but without any mercy did tyrannously triumph when there was neither man nor mean to resist them. For age and sex, young and old, they slew great numbers of young children, but many more women, more than fourscore years of age. For time and place their fury was as great 10 days after the victory as at the time of their entry. And as great respect they had to the church and churchyard for all their hypocritical boasting of the Catholic religion as the butcher had to his shambles or slaughterhouse. For person and country they spared neither friend nor foe, Portingale nor Turk. For profession and religion the Jesuits must give their ready coin, and all other religious houses both coin and plate, with all short ends that were good and portable. The rich was spoiled because he had, and the poor were hanged because they had nothing. Neither strength could prevail to make resistance, nor weakness move pity to refrain their horrible cruelty. And this was not only done when the chase was hot, but, as I erst said, when the blood was cold, and they now victors without resistance. I refrain to rehearse the heaps of dead carcasses which lay at every trench where they entered, the thickness whereof did in many places exceed the height of a man.
Okay, so having said I will refrain, he then doesn't repeatedly. And there's an interesting, there's a sort of trick that we had earlier as well, where there's a sort of deliberate irony being placed in some of these sentences. The good order that they preceded, good order of burning and destroying and things, where there's the way the language he's using is very clever at times. So yes, a lot of people are dying. We have the names of those who he knows. He has another bit of sort of grandiose, his own personal adventuring. I was given the key to the gate, and a bullet went past my ear or nose or whatever it was, very near his nose, and a bullet struck one of the merchants on the head without any great or dangerous hurt. Interesting. So a glancing wound, presumably there. And then I say, just into the numbers, Spaniards lost a few hundred, but the town losing many thousands of people, men, women, and children. And that this is not just something that happened in the heat of the moment. In fact, that's the thing. The heat of the moment on the day, on the Wednesday which we were still in, they don't do any spoiling initially. They're just running and chasing and killing and taking people down. And then we got this mention of 10 days passing where they're still despoiling. They're still going through. And it's the thing. They're going to take all the money from the churches. The rich was spoiled because he had, and the poor were hanged because they had nothing. And that's something we do directly see in the play. In A Larum for London, we do explicitly see people being basically hounded for cash, and if it is a 10-day process, the better part of 2 weeks, people just systematically going through the town and demanding whatever anyone's got, and if they don't have anything, they're hanged. And yeah, it's not going to get better, people. By the way, just you may want to look away now, Eric.
Also, the episode with Count Egmont is actually the play where he's kind of like the last man standing kind of thing, and they're like, come with us. Well, you can be a prisoner for now. We'll treat you fine. We don't know if they do after that, but
it wasn't a sort of thing of he just wouldn't stop fighting, and they said, no, we'll just surrender, man. It's fine. You're cool, Angela.
Well, I was just going to say about Egmont. So his father is one of the great Dutch heroes of the revolt. So Egmont's got really something to live up to because of that. So it's interesting, that position. In the play, I'm pretty sure he dies anyway, doesn't he?
I seem to recall something.
I think he sort of like ends up dying, but here it says that he's saved. I did look it up. I think, before when we were doing the plagues, I was interested which one of the Egmonts is this. I can't remember now.
I know. I think he does survive. Actually, I don't think he dies.
One
Other people
of them
die.
died. One of them died and was
His father
given-
dies. He's
given
executed.
honours by the Spaniards.
That's right. Oh, right. Oh, well, maybe
for
it's this
his
one.
prowess. Yeah.
Okay. Any additional thoughts?
I mean, is the size of this sacking this is the alarm for London, isn't it? Is a wake-up call to, as I quoted that Spanish thing, if you tolerate this, your children will be next, type of thing. Is the size of this that shocking? I mean, is this the first large sacking of a rich town?
It's not the first, but it's right on England's doorstep, and
But
it's
it is the
Catholics
biggest.
attacking Protestants.
Yeah, but it is the biggest. So the sack of Antwerp and the sack of Magdeburg later in the 40s, these are the two great horrific acts of the century. So they I mean these are truly, truly shocking. But absolutely right, there are others. There are others, but these are notorious. They're never forgotten.
Because it's so systematic. I mean, we if you compare it with something like it's a very different context, but well, it is and it isn't. But say Massacre at Paris, that is a relatively short scale event. It's not like this, which is a systematic, ongoing. It's an army has invaded and is going to work its way through the population and its money. Okay, on that cheerful note, let us continue with this cheerful text. To say, we're going to, having said he's going to not talk about any of the horrors, he is going to now continue talking about some horrors. So, Eric, I think, take it away.
I'm not sure whether we should include a trigger warning here.
I think we're well into the
No, it gets quite
warning
graphic.
for
That's
explicit
why.
violence.
Yeah. I forbear also to recount the huge numbers drowned in the new town, where a man might behold as many sundry shapes and forms of man's motion at time of death as ever Michelangelo did portray in his tables of doomsday. I list not to reckon the infinite numbers of poor Almains who lay burned in their armor, some then trails scorched out, and all the rest of the body free, some their head and shoulders burnt off, some so that you might look down into the bulk and breast and there take an anatomy of the secrets of nature. Some standing upon their waists, being burnt off by the thighs, and some no more but the very top of the brain taken off with fire, whilst the rest of the body did abide unspeakable torments. I set not down the ugly and filthy polluting of every street with the gore and carcasses of men and horses, neither do I complain that the one lacked burial and the other fleeing until the air, corrupted with their carrion, infected all that yet remained alive in the town. And why should I describe the particularity of every such annoyance as commonly happen in both camps and castles where martial feats are managed? But I may not pass over with silence the willful burning and destroying of the stately townhouse and all the monuments and records of the city. Neither can I refrain to tell their shameful rapes and outrageous forces presented unto sundry honest dames and virgins. It is a thing too horrible to rehearse, that the father and mother were forced to fetch their young daughter out of a cloister, who had thither fled as unto sanctuary to keep her body undefiled, and bestow her in bed between two Spaniards to work their wicked and detestable will with her. Shall I keep going?
No, Liza.
It is also a ruthful remembrance that a poor English merchant, who was but a servant, having once redeemed his master's goods for 300 crowns, was yet hanged until he were half dead, because he had not 200 more to give them. and the halter being cut down, and he coming to himself again, besought them on knees with bitter tears to give him leave to seek and try his credit and friends in the town for the rest of their unreasonable demand. At his reason, because he sped not, as indeed no money was then to be had, they hung him again outright, and afterwards of exceeding courtesy, procured the friars minors to bury him.
To conclude, of the 17,000 carcasses which were viewed on the Thursday, I think in conscience that 5,000 or few less were massacred after their victory, because they had not ready money, wherewith to ransom their goods at such prices as they pleased to set on them. At least all the world will bear me witness, that 10, yea 20 days after, whosoever were but pointed at, and named to be a Wallon, was immediately massacred without further audience or trial. For mine own part, it is well known that I did often escape very narrowly, because I was taken for a Walloon, and on Sunday, the 11th of this instant, which was the day before I got out of the town, I saw 3 poor souls murdered in my presence, because they were pointed to be Walloons, and it was well proved immediately that one of them was a poor artificer, who had dwelt in the town 8 years before, and never managed arms, but truly followed his occupation. Furthermore, the seed of these and other barbarous facts brought forth this crop and fruit, that within 3 days Antwerp, which was one of the richest towns in Europe, had now no money nor treasure to be found therein, but only in the hands of murderers and strumpets. For every Don Diego must walk jetting up and down the streets with his harlot by him in her chain and bracelets of gold. The notable bourse, which was wont to be a safe assembly for merchants and men of all honest trades, had now none other merchandise therein, but as many dicing tables as might be placed round about it all the day long. Tom.
Men will boast of the Spaniards that they are the best and the most orderly soldiers in the world. But sure, if this be their order, I had rather be competed to a bon seigneur than a brave soldier in such a band. Neither must we think, although it has pleased God for some secret cause only known to his divine majesty, to yield Antwerp and Maastricht thus into their hands, that he will spare to punish this their outrageous cruelty, when his good will and pleasure shall be to do the same. For surely their boasting and bragging of inquiry is over great to escape long unscourged.
Angela.
I have talked with sundry of them, and demanded why they would command that the town-house should be burned. And their answer was, because it was the place of assembly where all evil counsels were contrived, as though it were just that the stocks and stones should suffer for the offence of men. But such is their obstinate pride and arrogancy, that if they might have their will, they would altogether raze and destroy the towns, until no one stone were left upon another. Neither doth their stubborn blindness suffer them to perceive yet in so doing they should much endomage the king their master, whom they boast so faithfully to honour, serve and obey. As for the injuries done by them until our own nation particularly, I will thus set down as much as I know. We were quiet in the house appointed for the mansion of English merchants, under safe conduct, protection and placard of their king, having neither meddled any way in these actions, nor by any means assisted the estates of the country with money, munition, or any kind of aid. Yea, the governor and merchants, foreseeing the danger of the time, had often demanded passport of the king's governors and officers to depart.
Eric.
And all these with sundry other allegations, we propounded and protested unto them before they entered the English house, desiring to be there protected according to our privileges and grants from the king their master, and that they would suffer us there to remain free from all outrage, spoil, or ransom, until we might make our estate known unto the castellan and other head officers which served for the said king. All which notwithstanding, they threatened to fire the house unless we would open the doors, and being once suffered to enter, demanded presently the ransom of 12,000 crowns of the governor, which some being not indeed in the house, neither yet one part of the same, they spared not with naked swords and daggers to menace the said governor, and violently to present him death, because he had not wherewith to content their greedy minds. I will not boast of any help afforded by me in that distress, but I thank the Lord God, who made me an instrument to appease their devilish furies. And I think that the governor and all the company will confess that I used mine uttermost skill and aid for the safeguard of their lives, as well as mine own.
And Liza.
But in the end, all eloquence notwithstanding, the governor, being a comely aged man and a person whose hoary hairs might move pity, and procure reverence in any good mind, especially the uprightness of his dealing considered, they enforced him with great danger to bring forth all the money, plate, and jewels which was in the house, and to prepare the remnant of 12,000 crowns at such days and times as they pleased to appoint. And of the rest of our nation, which had their goods remaining in their several packhouses and lodgings elsewhere in the town, they took such pity that 4 they slew, and divers other they most cruelly and dangerously hurt, spoiling and ransoming them to the uttermost value that might be made or esteemed of all their goods. Yea, some one they enforced to ransom his goods twice, yea, thrice, and all that notwithstanding took the said goods violently from them at the last.
And we'll just pause there. We're getting a lot of incidents that we see reflected in the later play, either analogues or very, very similar. There's very much a punch to this of, I saw this is something I witnessed, to sections of this. Whereas earlier we were sort of getting these possibly exaggerated accounts of him going out and being shot at and stuff that felt actually quite comic and self-depreciating. Whereas here it's much more, I wanted to find out why this happened. So he talks to some people. So we have witness statements as well, coming with it. And then he brings our attention to what actually happened to the English house and the English merchants. And, he tried to do his best to try and save them from being looted, there was only so much that could be done. Any thoughts in the room before we go into our final chunk of text? It packs a punch.
I mean, it's a strange 10, 20 days after 17,000 dead, 5,000 after the fact that they've taken the town. It's it must be a because normally the command would either condone this type of outrageous killing and slaughtering of innocents for some purpose.
Because it's a total breakdown, isn't it? You just have to point at someone and say they're a walloon, that you can do whatever you like.
It's using rape and pillage as a weapon of war. They're trying to, Spanish are trying to get control over the whole of the Netherlands and the Low Countries, which would kind of like end up being 2 different parts. And this is a way of doing it. You're just terrified. If they come anywhere near you, you're just going to give in. That's
Eric.
I guess also, which I think it's mentioned later on, like sort of Antwerp is, well, it was also mentioned in the play. It's one of the sort of richest cities of the era. So being able to do that to Antwerp is like, okay, we're just gonna go now, kind of sort of, for everybody else, where you kind of have that moment of, yeah, this is terrifying.
And this whole thing about ransoming of goods, that's going to be, it's not a ransom really. It's just a series of extortions, because oh yes, you can definitely have this back if you give us some money. Oh no. Well, maybe some more money. We'll keep it anyway. Liza.
We get this in the play, don't we? We get the guy who runs into one lot of Spaniards and gives them all the money he has to ransom himself, and then he runs into another lot of Spaniards who also ask him for ransom, and he already gave it all to the last guys, so they hang him anyway.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
assume that's what they meant by someone they enforced to ransom his goods twice, yea, thrice, and notwithstanding took the said goods violently. I'm guessing it was maybe different groups of Spaniards, or...
Well, yeah. I mean, it's goods remaining in the several pack houses, so it's these are goods rather than ransoming yourself, as it were. But I'm sure it's all one and the same to a degree. Tom.
I remember in the play they divided up the city. They divided up the town, and they took this area, and this poor soul was held to ransom by one and walked through another's quarter, and they said, well, we don't care, you've just paid the other guy, you've got to pay us now. So they had divided up the town, and they were looting and just demanding ransoms.
Right. Well, into the final stretch, as it were. So, Tom, I think you're next, and I think it's four chunks each in the usual order. So, Tom, Angela, Eric, then Liza.
And all these injuries being opened unto the chief governors in time convenient, and whilst yet the whole sum set for several ransoms of our countrymen and the English house in general, were not half paid, so that justice and good order might partly have qualified the former rigours proffered by the soldiers, and said governors were as slow and deaf as the order were quick and light of hearing to find the bottom of every bag in the town. So yet it seemeth that they were fully agreed in all things, or if any contention were, the same was but strife, who or which of them might do greatest wrong. Keeping the said governor and merchants there still, without grant of passport or safe conduct, when there was scarcely any victuals to be had for any money in the town, nor yet the said merchants have any money to buy it, where it is. And as for credit, neither credit nor pawn can now find coin in Antwerp. In these distresses I left them, the 12th of this instant November, 1576. When I parted from them, not as one who was hasty to leave and abandon them in such misery, but to solicit their rueful causes here, and to deliver the same unto her majesty, the council in such sort I beheld it there.
And this is in effect the whole truth of the sacking and spoil of so famous a town, wherein is to be noted that the Spaniards and their faction being but 5,000, the trenches made against them of such height as seemed invincible, the power within the town 15 or 16,000 able fighting men well armed, I mean the townsmen ready armed being counted, it was charged, entered and won in 3 hours, and before 6 hours passed over, every house therein sacked or ransomed at the uttermost value.
The which victory being miraculous and past man's capacity to comprehend how it should be possible, I must needs attribute unto God's just wrath, powered upon the inhabitants for their iniquity, more than to the manhood and force of the Spaniards. And yet I mean not to rob them of their deserved glory, but to confess that both their order and valor in charging and entering was famous. And had they kept so good order, or showed the 10th part of such manly courage in using their victory in parting of their spoil, I must then needs have said that Caesar himself had never had any such soldiers. And This must I say for them, like that as their continual training in service doth make them expert in all warlike stratagem, so their daily trade in spoiling hath made them the cunningest ransackers of houses, and the best able to bring a spoil unto a quick market of any soldiers or master thieves that I ever heard of.
Liza?
But I leave the scanning of their deeds unto God, who will bridle their insolence when he thinketh good and convenient. And let us also learn out of this rueful tragedy to detest and avoid those sins and proud enormities which caused the wrath of God to be so furiously kindled and bent against the town of Antwerp. And let us also, if ever we should be driven to like occasion, which God forbid, learn to look better about us for good order and direction, the lack whereof was their overthrow. For surely the inhabitants lacked but good guides and leaders, for having none other order appointed but to stand every man armed in readiness before his door, they died there, many of them, fighting manfully, when the Walloners and High Dutches fled beastly. Let us also learn to detest the horrible cruelties of the Spaniards in all executions of warlike stratagems, lest the dishonor of such beastly deeds might bedim the honor wherewith English soldiers have always been endowed in their victories. And finally, let us pray to God for grace to amend our lives, and for power and foresight to withstand the malice of our enemies, that remaining and continuing in the peaceable protection of our most gracious sovereign, we may give him the glory, and all due and loyal obedience unto her majesty, whom God now and ever prosper and preserve. Amen.
Written on the 25th day of November 1576 by a true Englishman who was present at this piteous massacre, ut supra. Yeah, there is a real sense of, in the modern eyes, it's like a reporter coming out of a, it's very much like that. I almost, the talking to the soldier that were getting a witness, saying what he saw, and the reasons why he left was to get the truth out, to tell the Queen, and get this reportage out there. And he's written it on the 25th day of November, so it's a couple of weeks, and he's pulled this together. So that's what we get there. Again, lots of things that are sort of sympathetic with what is used in the play. That logic of be prepared, be ready for this kind of thing. Larum for London, people. It's all there in this this summing up at the end. He's got this little roundup at the end just to remind everyone of all the salient points, just to make sure you didn't miss anything. There we are. That's a little roundup of things and details. We don't have any stump. There was a sort of one reference of some of the fighters that I thought that might have been the seed for that, but that was it. There was nothing explicitly there, I don't think. I'm trying to remember what his real name was. He actually had a name, and I can't remember if he got mentioned in passing. I don't think he did, though. So yeah, that's the end of that account. It's powerful stuff. And though I'm sure it, but as any account, is going to have biases, it is interesting actually that he does try to be fair. He does go, look, the Spaniards, they were really good fighters, but then really terrible things happened. And it doesn't feel ridiculously biased, actually, in a way that actually I think Larum of London is a bit more biased in many ways. So any final thoughts from the room now that we've witnessed this piece of history? I'd be very interested now. The next step is actually to look into some actual history to see, whether this matches other accounts and how accurate this all is. Just because it seems accurate doesn't mean that it necessarily is, or that it isn't biased. But we like George Gascoigne. He seemed like a nice bloke. That said, this room haven't read his religious tracts, so you read a bit of it in Glass of Government, which he writes directly upon around about now. He's either written it already, or he's about to write it, actually. Yeah. Final thoughts from the room. Angela, do you have any final thoughts about this? We're all taking a bit of an in-breath, aren't we? It's just going, yeah.
Because this is not a play. This is real. So it is. That's the thing about that play that we said at the time. There's no light relief in all the different scenes that we were looking at. And you can see why it would have been horribly inappropriate. But I'm also interested the way that this particular text is really harking on the honour of the Spanish soldier. I mean, first of all, he makes clear right at the beginning, I'm not accusing any particular officers of this. Although he does at the end say they were clearly, like Tom said, actually, they were clearly willing for this to happen because they didn't redress, the English claims. So he impugns the honour of the Spanish soldier by saying they are master thieves. So it takes away from their credit. But there's not much else that you can do. Their power is overwhelming. And when you think this is 1576, and in only just over 10 years they're going to face an armada of these guys, you can just see how panicked everybody must have been.
Tom, any final thoughts?
Well, yeah, it seems a very honest account, or first-hand account. The only twist I would put on it is that if you allow your soldiers to do that type of thing, it's for a reason, and usually one of which is that they are far away from home, and if they get overrun, there is no quarter. They can't simply hop into a safe place. So you want them to be the biggest, the baddest, the meanest, and that's what does contribute to their professionalism, because they were sort of like, no, we're not gonna even stop and refeed and rest and things like that. It's let's do it now while we're hot. Let's do it while we have a hunger and a greed in our belly. And to take a town like that fortified in 3 hours is phenomenal.
Liza, any final thoughts?
Yeah, just that. I mean, as you said, this is war reporting, and it's quite a strong, clear narrative. Most modern day reporters don't speculate on God punishing you for your sins, but conventions of the time. So I think one of the reasons he emphasizes how good the Spanish soldiers are at the job of soldiering is he said at this point England has no standing army. You've got a bunch of local lords whose duty it is to muster troops when troops are needed, but that's basically it. We don't get a standing army till Cromwell and the new model army. So at least, I don't know, Angela, if I'm wrong, please correct me. But so he's talking about the Spanish soldiers and their daily training, making them the best. And perhaps he wants to, and also when he talks about local guides, good guides and leaders on the ground, I suppose the things he wants from the English crown are have a contingency plan and train up English soldiers.
And he does have an in at court. The previous year he was, preparing shows at Kenilworth and Woodstock for the Queen. So he's not completely. When he's saying about he's got to come back and get accurate information to the government, he's not exaggerating actually the access that this kind of writing might have afforded him. He doesn't get much out of it because he dies next year. On the 7th of October 1577, he dies at Stamford. Eric.
Yeah, it's interesting also to compare this with, for example, history plays that we've read and stuff, which are all about war, but there you don't get this kind of the place before this sort of glorify war, where you've got the whole thing of it's always nobles sort of trotting around. I don't know, in Edward IV or I don't know, troublesome reign, it's always all about the nobles and sort of maybe that's why also he kind of goes, it wasn't actually any nobles involved, or it was the common soldier, the common, it could be you kind of thing, or you don't really get that sort of level of a sense of hierarchy in the sort of what do you call it, in the Spanish army, whereas although he does name a few of the officers, he's like, they're probably all under the same guy, or we don't know. Also, what I found interesting was the whole God being the sort of scourging the Dutch, / Flemish / Walloons for their behavior. And it's like trying to justify the victory that way seems a bit not a cop out, because he does go, I would not rob them of their victory, but sort of they should have behaved in a decent and honorable manner, which is kind of weird considering the battles that England has fought before this and after this.
Well, it's that sort of. That's, I think Angela was saying this earlier. It's this thing of trying to go, why does God allow bad things to happen, and having to find some kind of reason, and say some of his other
Protestants, especially to Protestants should have won.
Yeah. It's the kind of questioning that turns up, say, in some of his other writing and to a degree in Glass of Government. It's that kind of knotty problem that would and also just imagine the man's probably traumatized. It's been a month, less than a month since he saw a really horrific thing. So what's foremost in his mind of going, why did God allow this to happen? That feels also actually that a man working through his trauma, because it might have shaken his belief there. Actually, there's a lot of here where I'm wondering about the irony that is being placed on some of these lines, that there's not being straight, that he's emphasizing how good people are at something horrific and at times, and I'm wondering about that as a writing style, that there's a deep level of sarcasm that might be coming up at times that we may be reading wrong, but who knows? Well, all that remains is to close this session. This is valuable and useful for assessing that play, but also assessing other history plays as well, when starting to assess things, as things that actually happened, and the weight which maybe we should be dealing with. All that remains to thank all the wonderful readers for all their wonderful reading. Thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye.